Thank you for joining us for an episode of Ask a Reenactor. Joining us this week is Private Omar El Sharkawy from the 2nd York Regiment of 1812 Reenactors, also known as Thompson's Company. And Omar will explore with us what it's like to be a reenactor and some of his favorite moments from past reenactment seasons. So again, thank you for joining us for a special episode of Ask a Reenactor.
So joining us this week on Ask a Reenactor is Omar, who is with the 2nd York Regiment of 1812 Reenactors, also known as Thompson Company. Omar, you've been a member of the company for several years now and been involved in a number of events in and around Mississauga and Ontario. But wondering if you can start us off by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your own background.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. My name is Omar El Sharkawy. I live in Mississauga, and I've been a member of 2nd York since April of 2017 officially, but I've only ever been really going to events since late 2018, I think. So, but I've been a member for some time now. I'm a recent graduate from the history program at the University of Toronto as well. So.
What drew you to reenacting in the first place?
Well, back when I actually first moved to Canada in around 2014, 2015, one of my first experiences was we were traveling around, taking in the sights. And we went down to the Niagara Peninsula, and, we passed by this old wooden structure. It was really interesting. It had this British flag flying over it. And I told my parents I wanted to go there and see it. I was 14, 15 at the time, and I was surprised to see that there was, a whole sort of this reenactment encampment that was happening that day. I had the privilege of meeting a lot of the reenactors that day too, and also being able to, see the fort itself. It was Fort George that was what we ended up going to, and I loved it. I loved seeing it. I don't know. Since then, ever since I found out that sort of living history and reenacting was the thing, I always wanted to be a part of it. And I wanted to be a part of it, I think, through high school, but I didn't know the proper channels. So it was very hard to get involved. I didn't know who to talk to. And I tried looking online. I couldn't really find anything that was close by or convenient or that much substantive information. But then right around 2017, early 2017, I get to meet Max Milling, who's currently a corporal in the 2nd York, and it was in the history class at the university, and I think we were introducing ourselves. And he, when he spoke, he said, "I do living history and reenacting," and that kind of piqued my interest. I didn't think I'd be able to actually get to speak with him or meet him, but lo and behold, it kind of I was able to, and then eventually we became friends. And then Maxwell was also in that class too, and I think he joined right around the same time that I did. And he told me about it. I was immediately interested. I've been wanting to do something of that sort for such a long time now. He told me about it. I went online, looked at some of the pictures, looked at some of the videos. I was immediately fascinated by it. It looked like, this unique, amazing experience. I've always known I wanted to be a part of it, but I didn't know what it entailed. And this was sort of the first time I realistically had the option in front of me. And I was able to, and I really seized it at that moment. I told him I wanted to be a part of it. And by April, I went to my first drill. And the rest is history, as they say.
So I know how you got in and what hooks you there, but what keeps you coming back?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I'm not sure it's one specific thing that does keep me going back, because there's a lot of things that I love about reenacting. I think the most probably basic thing is just the thrill and the rush of being in battle is obviously one of the biggest ones. It feels great. The adrenaline pumping through, the pace, the quickness, the aggression, the action that comes with a battle. It's just a great thing to be there, standing in line or in light infantry formation and exchanging shots with the enemy. There's a great degree of suspension of disbelief to it. You actually get so engaged in it that you just isolate the world around you. And that's a lovely part of it. I also really enjoy just the company with friends. It's great to be able to just go out in the weekends every once in a while to these big events and just do it with friends, do it with people that you love, and people that you really like, and to just hang around with them We have a lot of common interests both inside and outside the hobby. We just talk about that. And so really it's the company that really, the company of friendship, I think, that helps make a big part of it. And also public education. That's also a big part of it. I love it. I think one of the greatest things about being a reenactor is having this role of being a public educator. I'm very thrilled whenever anyone gets to come up to us and gets to ask us a question. People are always told reenacting, don't hesitate to come up, and that's true. Because we love what we do, and we especially love to share and talk about what we do. And public education and the research side is such an interesting part of reenacting. I've become really immersed in that as we've gone through, to really form a better understanding of the period, to research, not just to enhance your impression, but also to be able to retell that research to the audience as well. Being able to tell them about these really substantive histories too, right? I mean, there's a lot of our public education, of course, we portray a military unit, but the great part is that, we're also a civilian militia, and we're portraying a period overall. And so when it comes to educating the public, we don't just discuss, I think, or I like to intend not to just discuss the military minutiae, things that are very technical and may not be of interest to everyone. They are of interest, but not everyone wants to know the really, really fine detail. It might not always be the most exhilarating or substantive thing to teach, but also like the social history and just the time period itself, knowing about, what the overall zeitgeist of the period was, what the political atmosphere was, what the social conditions were, what being a militiaman entailed. This public education side of things, I really enjoy. So I think it's those three things that sum up, that probably keep me coming back, is just the action, the company with friends, the public education and research. Yeah.
Well, and yourself as a young historian, just graduated, and history obviously is in your blood, and that ability to be a living historian and research and interpret the past in a very personal way, that has to be a fascinating element as well. I think that ties into your public education comments.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think that's what makes reenacting such an interesting part of living history, is how dynamic it is. When you're telling people about this history in uniform, I don't know, it almost has a different, it almost has a kind of mystique or different effect to it when you're doing that. To be able to sort of relive those histories, you're able to animate it and visualize it to people in a way that you really oftentimes can't when you're being very descriptive to them. Granted, that of course does have its value, and descriptive histories are a big part of what we do, but that animation is such a crucial part of it. That animation, that experimental archaeology too, because I like to think that we're also doing research when we're doing this living history as well, because it is experimental archaeology. We're trying to recreate what the time period was like. Oftentimes we're trying to find things out that may have not been on the historical record, or things that probably weren't really written about. Things like ordinary camp life, or like the individual histories of soldiers, things that weren't always the best documented. So that side of things, I think, is fascinating. I think that's what makes that dynamism of reenacting interesting, is how it enhances and elevates public education, and how it really allows us to also further our research at the same time.
You mentioned the company of friends, and that camaraderie that exists,
yes,
within the company. And the company, Second York as a company, Thompson's company, has grown. You're part of that growth of that company. I think we're, if all told, I think we're around 16 or 17 members now, somewhere in that realm. People within the company have different roles, different things that they bring to the table, for lack of a better word, but also within the company structure, how it functions. What's your role within Second York?
My role, I mean, of course, if you get to the very basics of it, I'm a private soldier. I'm just a rank and file like everyone else. I stand in line, and I take orders, and I give and take with the officers and NCOs, and I fire, and I go to the camp and interpret a private soldier. That's the basics of it. I think my role is, I'd probably say research is the biggest thing that I try and do. Is I try to go through a lot of effort to read and look at artifacts and material culture from the time being, from that time, and I try to help better reconstruct or supplement our sort of existing research. My focus has always really been on the military material culture for the most part. I've been really interested in that. So the uniforms, for the militia especially, it's interesting because there's no surviving militia uniforms, and the documentation about the militia uniform is oftentimes very poor. So trying to fill in the gaps with the research is really great when you're trying to look at all these loose pieces of this documentation or these manifests and say, buttons or aspects of material culture that you have left over, and you try to reconstruct aspects of the uniform or try to get a more holistic picture of what a militiaman would have looked, what the average militiaman would have looked like at the time period. I'd say that's probably what I do most. So yeah.
And we'll draw attention here. We'll put a link in to, I know some of your research is appearing in the new publication by Second York, the Gazette, and most recently on the uniform, the history of the uniform. So different ways in which we are reaching out and connecting to the living history world to our audience. It's not just the in-person events, which of course are a challenge during COVID, but also the research does not stop, and the passion doesn't stop from you and from others that are in the hobby of ways in which to explore further those nuances of living history. It's absolutely fascinating to see it shared. You mentioned the camaraderie, the friendships, the public education, but the other one, and I think this is probably what draws most attention and probably generates most of the questions, that rush of being on the battlefield. And can you describe what it is like to be on the field of battle firing a musket?
Oh boy, that is that I'll tell you in one word, it's exhilarating. But if I were to describe it in more detail, I mean, the adrenaline rush and, like I said, the suspension of disbelief, I think those are core parts of it. It's just when you're out on the field, you're working as part of a unit and you're working with this great cohesion with everyone, and that coordination is one of the best feelings that you have on the battlefield. It's just everyone's side by side, doing everything efficiently, fighting the best that we can, really tooth and nail, because you start to think it's a real battle at point, right? It's interesting too, because I oftentimes go back and watch all the replays of battles too, right? And the feeling when you're watching it from a distance, I don't know, there's such a dissonance between how I actually felt on the battlefield and rewatching. I said it was actually like that when people were watching it, because when you're on, it feels everything is a lot louder, the pace is quicker. There's more adrenaline, there's more action, there's more aggression with how you do every action, and also there's kind of this you close out the rest of the world. There's usually an announcer on the battlefield, for example, right, who's someone who's sort of emceeing, who's talking about the details of the battle as it goes on, a commentator of sorts. You never hear a single word that they say when you're on the battlefield, right? Like, I've gone back and listened, it's great commentary, but I never remember a single word. I don't remember hearing anything, because you just lock out the world and you start to really think it's a battle, and everything happens quicker too. That's the big thing. Everything happens a lot more quickly. When you're looking at the battle, it feels a lot slower than when you're actually there. When you're there, everything feels like minutes feel like they're happening in seconds. I'll look, for example, at footage of a reenactment when there's something really intense that's happening, for example, or like a siege or a charge, and then you'll see that over the footage, it takes a couple minutes. It takes a minute or two. When you're on the battlefield, it feels like 2 seconds. You go in, you go out, and it passes by. It's a real rush. I'll tell you that. It's just like I said, that's exhilarating. So.
And that must give you a very different perspective. You mentioned earlier that military history is something that you're fascinated by, in military material culture. But that must give you, as a historian, a very different perspective on when it comes to analyzing and talking about the life of a soldier. I mean, you can that's something you don't get from the textbooks and from the school courses.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I absolutely agree, and I mean, I think that's a big part of our experimental archaeology too. Is when you're out on the battlefield and you're simulating what a soldier's like. Granted, people aren't firing musket balls at you, so thankfully there's no lethality involved, and everyone stays safe, and there's all these protocols, and we abide by them. At the same time, though, with all the noise and the uniform, I I keep coming back to this concept of suspension of disbelief. It just keeps happening, and you think that you're actually there. And the way that you act, I think, helps you. It helps you better appreciate the stress of the situation, even if it's just very minor. Because obviously, you're not. There's no threat of death, so you're not trying to. You still know there's danger. There's still that concept, but perhaps it's not as real on the battlefield, even though the battlefield helps simulate parts of it. But it definitely helps you. It helps you appreciate what the actual stress and what the experience would have been like, what people would have done in those situations too, because that's a big part of it. We don't have that individual microhistory of what people did on the battle. Oftentimes we don't. About what people do. In some cases, we thankfully do. It's documented in some instances, but we don't know what their feelings were like when they're on the battlefield, how they acted in every second and every motion, and the minutiae of the whole thing. And reenacting helps really fill in that gap.
You've also there's that interplay between the audience per se and the reenactors, which of course is not, typically from, say, a battlefield perspective. You didn't have a lot of spectator sports going on at the time. But I've seen a lot of those interactions where there's theatrics involved. So some of the scripting is good. But what I wanted to focus on with this was you mentioned about being on the field and moving in unison with your comrades, with your company. I want to highlight the fact that this is something you train and you practice a great deal before the audience ever sees you on the field. How can you talk a little bit about the practice that goes into being a reenactor?
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, the meat of it's always the drill, and not just individual drill, but also I think our sergeant puts it best when he talks about drill. He says harmony is the key word, and I mean, I think that's absolutely the key part of it. It's harmony. It's this. When you drill, you're both honing your individual skills, but you're also honing your skills in tandem with those around you, because every soldier in the line needs to be as good as the other soldier. We all need to count we all need to count on one another when we're out on the field. And usually before a battle happens, we'll try and set up drills, or even in the off season, we'll try and like right now, for example, this is a great opportunity for us to drill some more because it's been some time since we've had our last real reenacting seasons, and so we have to drill a lot, and you have to stay fresh and get that cohesion and harmony. So I mean, you're absolutely right. What you see on the battlefield is really the result of probably weeks and weeks of people just drilling nonstop, trying to drill, not just to know the motions and be able to execute them perfectly, but also the harder part, being able to execute it with all those people sort of operating as one sort of big block, right? So yeah,
there's got to be, I mean, after this year and a half or whatever we've been through here since the last it's probably closer to 2 years since the last major reenactment now. I mean, there's got to be a great deal of rust that
absolutely, especially in terms of the cohesion.
That's
where the biggest issues I think usually are, and even the drills that we've done, that's shown itself to be the biggest problem. The funny thing is, the individual motions I think tend to be easier to remember, because it's there can still be some rust there, but generally I don't know, I find it's good muscle memory. It's also something people can do at home, because you can do it all on your own time when you're doing individual motions. But the harmony is where it becomes the rustiest. After a long off season, it's crucial that the unit drill constantly as a whole, not just individually, so that they can get that harmony back, and so that they can operate as really as a line, as a whole unit.
And safety being the prime concern for
absolutely
the field.
Yes, absolutely.
What are some of the things you look forward to as a reenactor on a regular basis? Like when you look forward to the season, say you're in the spring and the season's just about to start, what are some of the highlights for you that you look forward to each year?
Oh, I mean, aside from everything I've just mentioned of the company of friends and public education, and being in these events and going through that rush, I think it's some of the small things that really attract me every season, that really get me to look forward to it. Like one thing are the road trips, as oftentimes when these events, most of them happen fairly far away. And a lot of them, for example, have run Niagara, and it's just nice to I don't know, the feeling when it's the morning of a reenactment. You're ready to hop into a car with some friends, because we usually carpool and take all this equipment with us, and just go on this 100-kilometer drive, like this, like nice breeze, down through across the shores of Lake Ontario and all through the highways to the Niagara. That little road trip, I think, experience that we tend to have is I mean such a great part of it. And I guess it's the company that does it too, because we always tend to be with friends in that case. But I don't know, just being able to go out and drive for such long periods of time. I guess it's something I appreciate on its own level, is being able to just drive through all these open spaces for a long time, just driving for a while to get to this destination. I mean, that's a small thing, but it's something I always look forward to. And I mean, another is usually every season. I mean, we're always in the process of building our kit, for example, our uniform parts, because most of these things, or we're expected eventually to privately purchase all of the things that we own. Not initially. We have, obviously, loaner equipment that we generously receive from Heritage Mississauga, but we're expected to usually buy our own uniform. And I mean, it's a nice process to be able to own all the things that you have. So every season annually, I also look forward to being able to get a hold of some new kit, just buy these nice new pieces of uniform equipment, all so that we can try and build our kit better, enhance our impression, because we're always in a way adjusting our kit. We're trying to add new things, test out new things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, all of this over, the basic overlay of our uniform. That's something I always look forward to. I mean, maybe when I'm done with my kit, I don't know if I'll look forward to it anymore, because I'm not sure what'll be left to buy.
That's when you get a promotion and have to buy a new jacket.
Precisely. And you have to buy all the new accoutrements that come along with it too. Yeah, but perhaps. But I do also think because our impression is ever evolving, we do have the luxury of being able to buy new things, to change things out too. That's I think also a nice thing. Is a piece of kit that I bought 2 years ago. Some of the things I'm generally considering purchasing, for example, in the next couple seasons, are things I already own, but I want to get, say, something that's slightly different or slightly better iteration of it, or something I can have, so I can pass on the old piece of kit to someone else who will need it too. So yeah, that's something that's but one always looks forward to. I guess just buying new things is really nice. So that we really like. Yeah.
And we should be very clear that this isn't exactly going shopping. You can't walk into a store and find parts.
Oh, no. Everything is bespoke and tailor-made. I mean, that's the best part. Maybe that's why there's such pride in being able to purchase these things, because you always feel like they're made for you. There's such great pride of ownership when you go and you get the coat tailored and you have it made to your specifications. Or you buy specific pieces of kit that really help enunciate your character, like really small things like a canteen or a haversack, for example. Those kinds of things, or new belts or whatever.
Yeah, so it's fascinating to see, particularly when you go to reenactment and you see Sutler's Row open up, and I always get a kick out of it where the public comes to these events, and Sutler's Row is a wonderful place for them to wander around, but Sutler's Row really is for the reenactors.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I think so. I think the public can. There's still a lot of value to be extracted from, because settlers are also reenacting as well.
Yeah.
They're also portraying, living history. It's a different form of living history. It's living history in the form of sutlery, and I mean all the things that they make. I mean, the settlers. I think we're very lucky in the reenacting world to have such great and such many settlers. Mm-hmm. Who make all kinds of really specialized equipment, a lot of things that are lost arts that settlers still keep carrying on. They really are. It really is a living heritage that they're carrying on. And I think the public can appreciate even from a reenacting perspective. Plus, they also tend to sell things that are just nice to have. Yeah. I mean, for example, a sash would be really nice to own. Those things, that would be a pretty nice thing to just wear on modern clothes, for example, And they tend to make these really, really nice woolen sashes. So yeah, I mean, also souvenirs. They're nice souvenirs too, I think.
Absolutely.
So
if you were approached, I mean, a few years ago you were trying to figure out how to get into the hobby yourself, but if you were approached by somebody saying, how do I get involved, what kind of advice or direction could you give somebody starting out in the hobby or interested in exploring the hobby, and some recommendations for what the commitment's like and things like that? Can you walk through somebody who is new and interested in learning more?
Yeah, of course. I mean, um, I think nowadays thankfully it's a lot easier to join in reenacting. I mean, back when I started out, it was really a word of mouth thing that you'd be able. I mean, I joined through word of mouth. If I hadn't been, in that class on that day and met this specific person, I may have not been there. But thankfully, that's not something people I don't think have to worry about much longer. There's been a lot more reenacting has been, even during the pandemic, believe it or not, when there aren't any events, it's been better publicized. Through social media now, there's these websites, there's a digital infrastructure that is, I think, more accessible for a lot of people to be able to join. Uh, the the advice I'd give to reenactors, it's a bit of a tough one. I mean, I'd say, I would say that in reenacting, I think you always want to sort of embrace the community. I think is the biggest thing. Uh, I'm not going to hide the fact that I mean, like with anything, when you get into it, it's very disorienting. You don't know anyone. You're entering this brand new world. I mean, I felt that. I'm pretty sure everyone who started reenacting has felt that when they first began. And I would say when people start out, just make sure to sort of to embrace the community. Reenacting, I think it has a very welcoming and cordial community, and I think it's very inviting for all the people who want to start. And we try our best to make it the least intimidating and the most accessible experience possible through just being able to constantly connect with this network of people that you have in reenacting if you join the unit, and also the unit sort of looking out for people. So mentioned loaner equipment, for example. That's a big part of it too, is helping ease the transition because it is a big sort of physical commitment to have to. I mean, there aren't too many events. You go to events every once in a while, but you go out to these events and you usually camp there for 2 days, and there's also usually a big financial commitment involved. But I think people help ease it, for example, when they give out loaner equipment to people to help them sort of test things out, do a dry run, see if it's something that they like, and try to get immersed within the world, and see if it's something that they want to, be able to commit to later down the line. And thankfully, because of the state of loaning, of being able to loan equipment, people don't have to purchase everything at once. People can, they can slowly ease into the hobby. If they see that they like it, they can keep going and they can hang on to some loaner equipment. And over time, as they buy these new things and get this new pride of ownership from owning all this kit, they can become more autonomous and more independent overall, and just be happier as reenactors in general too. I mean, even with camping, that network also matters. Just being able to drive out with people, being able to set up camp, being able to connect with all these people individually. So I guess that would be my biggest piece of advice is just embrace community, because that's a cornerstone.
In the sense of that community too, you second York alone, but I know the hobby in general, there's a wide array of ages, of backgrounds, of cultures, of interest levels. So I always say there's a place for everyone, and you have a structure that supports new people coming in with training and getting up and running. And
yeah, absolutely, I agree. I mean, I think it can look intimidating, from superficially. Like I said, when that's something that's brand new. But yeah, there is that structure to accommodate new people who are trying to get into the hobby. And as I said, I think nowadays it's probably easier than ever to be able to get involved in that kind of thing. And yeah, it's just welcoming,
and the first step is coming out and saying hi.
Precisely. That's usually where we get them.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So yeah, they come out and say hello, and then they get the form.
They're recruited on the spot.
No. Usually it's a lot more. Yeah, I mean, it's entirely voluntary. It's up to people if they're interested in that kind of thing. That's what we want to attract. We want to attract people who are interested towards that kind of thing. Yeah. We want people who know that they want to do something like this, to be able to find the proper channels, to be able to know that if they want to do this, they can do it, and they can come out and they can join and they can commit, or they can choose not to commit, or they can try to test things out and see what it's like and meet these people.
I think it's fascinating for me, seeing the company grow and seeing yourself and others come on board. It's just watching the company grow is just a true pleasure, to be honest. It really is something that I enjoy. Knowing where it's come from, seeing where it's been and where it's going is just it's incredible. So let's end on a fun note, and if you can give me your top 3 favorite moments from all the times of you being out there as a reenactor. Give us some highlights of your experiences.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I've only ever done one full season, but I felt like I've done so much in that. It's also hard to choose what to pick. I think there are 3 moments though that I would love to highlight. Probably no particular order. I think is probably the first one would be the engagement at Bradley in October of 2019. This was the second Bradley that I'd been to, and we had this moment I think it was on the Saturday battle, where we were going in through this wooded trail that's like on the side of the battle. It's a rather long battlefield, so it's got it's not really this massive wide field. It's more of, I guess, I don't know, it's more of a long battlefield that people march across, but it's got all these trails on the side, these wooden trails that you march through, and marching through that felt great. I don't know, it really helped cultivate the atmosphere of the battle, because a lot of the battles in 1812 would have also been across very wooded areas, and so it's great that we were able to go to. And the best part is that we went through there, and we were able to we kind of laid an ambush of American forces, or we kind of did a surprise attack, where we sort of jolted out of the woods and onto the field and surprised the Americans. And then we were stuck right there in the middle of their line. At one point, I think we were even firing back to back.
Yes.
Because they were in front of us and they were behind us, and we were getting sandwiched. And it was great. It was exhilarating. There was a lot of pressure, feeling this kind of encirclement, and everyone was around you. That we were isolated, but then we withdrew back into the woods and we ran, and then we came out back again. But that raid in Bradley, that was a great moment. And to me, that was one of the most creative scenarios that I think I've ever been a part of in 1812. And the fact we were able to do that in Bradley was great. And in fact, I'd love in future Bradleys for that kind of thing to happen, because that was a great moment. It was captured on video too, I think. The moment we emerged out of the woods too. So that's the great thing about it. That was a great moment. The second one I'd say is the Battle of Stony Creek. We had that's out in Stony Creek in Hamilton. This was in June of 2019. Stony Creek is this, has this great big field that's with all this tall grass and this little church out on its periphery. And the battle was very intense. It was a large battle. The Americans, I think, were encamped up on this hill, and they had artillery and they had lines firing down on us. And at one point in the battle, we were called to charge the guns. And so, things are about to go down when you're told to command port arms, because that effectively means you're holding out your arms in front of you like this. You're prepared to go in and really charge and smite the enemy. And so we were called to charge. We went to port arms, and then we slowly marched up, chanting our motto: "Push on, push on, push on." The motto of kind of the kind of unofficial motto of Second York: "Push on, brave York volunteers." And we then towards the end, we all just scattered and just looked for targets, and it was great. We got in a little melee, and then we sort of just melted away and had to retreat at some point because we were overwhelmed by the numbers. But that charge was a great moment. We charged the gun, and for a short while, we took hold of them, and that was an absolutely exhilarating moment. Probably, I know I didn't rank these, but probably one of my favorite moment of all was at the Battle of Fort Erie, the Siege of Fort Erie. Actually, Fort Erie is the biggest event that's held throughout probably the biggest War of 1812 event held in North America in general, I think. And all these reenactors from the United States and from Canada converge on it. And the field on it, it's probably the biggest field you've ever seen. And of course, it's a field that leads up to the fort. To this great stone monolith that is Fort Erie, and it was held by the Americans. We were doing the scenario of the Siege of Fort Erie when the British were supposed to, in September of 1814, when they sieged the fort, and we fought our way up to the fort and up to its moats and ditches, And then we were called to storm the fort, to charge in. And so kind of like at Stony Creek, except not entirely, is we went to Port Arms, we charged, we all, it was a bit, it was orderly at first, but then when you went down into the ditch, it was kind of every individual soldier running in towards the fort, running into the breach. So we ran, we charged, we slid down into the ditch, and then we were just running, and it was this complete ruckus, and everyone was yelling. And you had all these units, all these soldiers from, you know, the Glengarrys, and you had different light infantry, and you had redcoats who were charging in. It was this great mass of troops. This was probably the battle where the suspension of disbelief was at strongest, because you felt like there was such a great degree of scale to it. Fort Erie is the biggest event, but it still doesn't, you know, Battle of Fort Erie, I think, had thousands of soldiers. One of the biggest battles in the War of 1812. But Fort Erie, even though there's probably only, I think it's only 150, which is a lot still, 150, 200 people for a reenactment. You feel like there's thousands of people. You feel like there's a sense of scale, because the moment we were into the fort and we were sieging, we were just running in into the breach. And with all these people around you, it really felt like this great, like almost like disorganized rush into the fort with all the thousands of people around you, even though it was probably only, you know, 30, 40 people at most who were in there with us, probably even less. But yeah, we charged into the breach. We went up into the fort itself, and then we were boosted up on top of a little stone wall so that we could get close and we could actually start engaging the Americans. And we were just we're all mounting and pushing one another up. And the moment we get up there, I swear you go back to the footage, like I said, and it's minutes that happens over, but it felt like seconds, because the moment we get up there, we're trying to orient ourselves, see what we're going to do, what we're going to attack, and then the magazine explosion happens, and there's this just great big ball of fire in your periphery. I don't even have a chance to see it. You feel it, and you see it in the corner of your eyes. And then immediately you run out, and then the retreat was just as exciting as running into the breach itself. All these people were running out, running away from the field, and this great disorganized rout was happening at the end. It was a great moment.
And I can feel the passion in your voice with this, but you talk about walking in the footsteps of time. I mean, the other reenactments like Bradley and even Stony Creek for an element of it. But at Fort Erie, you're on the battlefield. You are where the battle was fought, and where you know, sadly, people lost their lives back in 1814. And there's a respect that comes with that. As much as there is passion, I know from the reenactment community there is a great respect to honoring those that fell before you. And like I said, suspension of disbelief, but there's also this knowledge of you're doing this respectfully and an educational perspective as well. But thank you for spending this time with us, and like I said, the passion comes through. You draw us in and want us to be part of it too, and I appreciate that greatly. And from a historian and an educator's perspective, thank you for doing what you do to highlight this fascinating part of our history, but also bring a new level of engagement and interest to it from the public engagement perspective of education. And greatly appreciate the time, the interest, the energy you bring to it. And here's hoping 2021 at some point you can get back on the field, back to reenacting. Yes. And hopefully 2022 brings a return of the regular season.
Oh, yes. We're optimistic. We're going to come back strong whenever it begins. Yeah. We're going to come back like never before.
And here's hoping even the fall that we've got some things that we can engage with and events that can happen. We know engagement at Bradley 2021 is scheduled for October 2nd, 3rd. Fingers crossed that it can run, but there are things to look forward to, hopefully, now that we seem to see the light at the end here.
Yes.
But, anyway, thank you, Omar, for spending this time and for joining us with Ask a Reenactor.
Thank you. It was a privilege. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for spending some time with us here at Ask a Reenactor. And thank you to Omar for sharing his stories and his passion for reenacting with us. Truly a fascinating way to learn more about the hobby and more about what makes reenactors tick and makes them come back for more each and every year. And we look forward to seeing both Omar and you out there at future reenactment events.